Hey everyone, welcome. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining me for this explainer. Today, we're taking a completely fresh look at a classic. We're going to deconstruct a famous micro-fable, the story of the honest woodcutter, and we're going to extract the incredible real-world value hidden right inside it. We aren't just reading a story today, no. We are uncovering the true, quantifiable return on investment of honesty. It's a fascinating breakdown, and by the end of this, you'll see exactly why integrity isn't just a nice moral choice, but often the most profitable one you can actually make.
Okay, let's dive into this. I want to start by throwing a question right at you. What happens when doing the right thing costs you literally everything? It's a healthy thought, right? We so often think of honesty as this easy, universally praised virtue. But true honesty? It's usually tested when the stakes are just incredibly high, when telling the truth might mean you literally walk away empty-handed. This is the cold, hard reality where our explainer begins today. It drops us straight into the emotional core of a situation where survival and morality are about to completely collide.
To really understand this test, we have to understand the stakes. Our source material introduces us to a poor woodcutter living near a forest. A poor woodcutter. One axe, one river. Think about that. This isn't a story about a guy who lost a weekend hobby tool. This axe is his entire livelihood. Every single day he goes out to cut wood just to earn enough money to feed his family. There's no backup plan, there's zero savings account to fall back on. That single piece of iron and wood, it's the fragile thread keeping his family from starvation.
Now, let's track exactly how this crisis unfolds. It starts with his everyday, mundane routine. Step 1. Every day he cuts wood to earn money. Pretty simple. But then, step 2 hits. One day, while he's chopping a tree right beside a river, tragedy strikes. The axe slips from his hands and plunges straight into the deep water. In an instant, his ability to provide is just gone. But then step 3 completely disrupts everything. Suddenly, a magical fairy appears. The sequence goes from routine to absolute devastation to a spark of the supernatural, literally in the blink of an eye.
Before we get to the magic, though, just pause for a second and listen to this line directly from the text. He became very sad because he could not afford to buy a new one. I really want you to imagine being in this exact scenario. Seriously, put yourself in his shoes for a second. You're staring into deep water, watching the one thing that feeds your family sink completely out of sight. You have absolutely zero capital to replace it. This is a moment of pure, unadulterated vulnerability and despair. I mean, he is at absolute rock bottom.
And that brings us to a really fascinating concept. When the magical fairy appears, well, we naturally view her as the rescuer, right? But I want to reframe that for you. She is not just a savior. She is essentially a mystical auditor. She's the administrator of a test. And a test like this is a deliberate trial of character presented during a moment of extreme desperation. Why is that so important? Because, let's be honest, it's easy to be honest when you have a safety net. The true measure of character is what you do when you're completely desperate, and a massive shortcut is suddenly dangled right in front of your face.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because the fairy doesn't just hand his livelihood back to him. Oh no, she escalates the temptation deliberately. First, she dives into the river and brings out an axe made entirely of solid gold. Then, she dives again and returns with a silver axe. Finally, on the third dive, she brings out his old, worn iron axe. This is a brilliantly calculated psychological ladder. She is actively presenting him with unimaginable, life-changing wealth right before offering him his harsh reality. And with those glittering axes gleaming in the light, she asks him this simple, three-word question. Is this yours? Think about the intense psychological weight hanging in the air during that pause. The woodcutter knows he's poor. He knows a golden axe would instantly lift his family out of poverty forever. He knows the fairy wouldn't know the difference. All he has to do is say one word, yes, and his financial struggles are completely over. The temptation of claiming unearned wealth in a moment of total desperation is just immense.
Now, what's really fascinating here is the stark contrast in his reactions. When faced with the glittering temptation of gold and silver, his response? No, that's not mine. He rejects it outright, no hesitation. But look at his reaction to his dull, heavy, cheap iron reality. The text explicitly tells us he smiled. Yes, that's my axe. He doesn't just accept the hard reality of his iron axe, he actually accepts it with joy. He prefers the truth of his poverty over the live instant wealth. And this, right here, is the triumphant turning point of our explainer. Because he passed this brutal moral test, the narrative shifts completely. The fairy was pleased with his honesty. By choosing not to lie, by refusing to take what simply wasn't his, truth prevails over temptation. And because he proved his character when nobody, and I mean nobody, would have blamed him for taking the easy way out, the universe, or in this case the fairy, decides to rewrite his reality.
So the crucial point is the number 3. The fairy didn't just pat him on the back for being a good guy and hand him his old iron axe. No, his honesty literally multiplied his assets by 3. As a reward, she gave him all 3 axes, the gold, the silver, and the iron one. His single decision to remain honest in the face of temptation triggered an exponential return.
Let's break down this payout visually, because I absolutely love looking at the actual ROI here. Think of this as his newly compounded reward. 1/3 of his new axe portfolio, which by the way is a hilarious concept to think about, a diversified portfolio of axes. But 1/3 is what he originally earned, his baseline iron axe. But look at the rest. He gets a 33% silver axe, which we can call the honesty bonus, and a 33% golden axe, which is the integrity bonus. By maintaining his integrity, he didn't just survive a crisis, he walked away with high-value assets that far exceeded his original starting point. Honesty, in this framework, is a seriously high-yield investment.
This brings us to what I like to call the multiplier effect of truth. Let's summarize exactly how a single honest choice cascaded into a completely new life. First, he refused to lie. By doing so, he successfully reclaimed his livelihood. But then, the multiplier kicked in. He gained gold and silver as well. He expressed gratitude, thanking the fairy. And the ultimate outcome? He secured a happy, prosperous future for his family, living happily ever after. The initial crisis actually became the exact catalyst for his ultimate success, solely because he navigated it with absolute honesty.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core moral of our source text and really the overarching theme we've been unpacking today. Honesty is always rewarded. Now sure, in the real world, magical fairies might not pop out of rivers handing out solid gold tools, but the principle remains incredibly robust. Trust, integrity, and reputation, those are the true gold and silver of our society. When you're honest, especially when it's difficult, and especially when it costs you in the short term, you build a foundation of trust that yields incredible compounding rewards over a lifetime.
Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought. We all face our own rivers. We all face moments where we lose something vital, and a shortcut suddenly presents itself. The real magic of this fable isn't the fairy, it's the choice. So I leave you with this to reflect on. When you are at your most desperate and your own golden axe unexpectedly appears, what will you say? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep growing, and I'll see you next time.